everyone, and welcome to our first Best of 2023 podcast. And it is part one of our Best Books of 2023, where I'm joined again by Publishing Scotland's Vikki Reilly. Hello, Vikki.
Hello, Alistair.
And there will be a part two to this, more of which later, but we're going to try and stick to fiction and crime fiction in the first part. Let's see if we manage to do that before running out of time, as is our tradition when we do these podcasts. But before we get into individual books, I'm surrounded by loads of individual books here. Let's talk about, was there themes and trends or ideas from the last 12 months that you had noted?
Yes.
Right.
Well, I think 2023, this year for me, I think there was two strongest themes that sort of came through to me over this year. And one was there was a lot of books that did reimaginings and retellings, particularly of historic. I mean, there's been a huge trend over the last few years about reimagining Greek myths, but this year in Scotland, in Scottish writing, there's been a lot of that, but not Greek myths. It's been Shakespeare and Frankenstein, like books based around Frankenstein and Shakespeare plays. So we'll talk about a few of those later on. And the second theme that I picked up on quite a bit this year, which has been a bit missing, I think, in fiction writing for the last few years. I've decided to call this the everyday wonder.
Right.
And those are books that are just really rooted in real life and the sort of extraordinary ordinariness of living. I think they sort of went away a wee bit over the last couple of years because there has been a lot of dystopia and all that kind of thing. But I think like life's as they're really lived kind of made a bit of a comeback this year. So those were the two main themes that I sort of noticed that a lot of books were coming up with. Yeah,
that's interesting, because even some of the kind of more dystopian or science fiction books are more rooted in a more recognizable life than the kind of real high fantasy things that maybe we've talked about in the past few years. So I think that's right. And that kind of fictionalizing everyday lives, often from the past or the recent past, is something that's been really interesting as well. And before we again get onto the books, how did you feel the year went in terms of books and things like festivals? You know, I thought the Edinburgh Festival was kind of bigger again than it had been last year. Last year, people were still a bit reticent about, gathering in large numbers and all that kind of stuff. But this year things were kind of more back on track and ready.
Definitely. 2022 was not a good year for book festivals. Folk did stay away a little bit, but that was, like I think most festivals will tell you that their audience numbers were down. But this year definitely the audiences came back, and sales were better, audiences were better. It was really lovely to see, because I was a bit worried. When I was looking through 2022, I was like, is this a blip, or is this going to be a trend? And what will that mean if festivals fall by the wayside? But they've come rallying back, and that's good.
Well, it's nice for me, as someone who chairs the odd book event, that a lot of them were kind of packed out to the gunnels, and it felt like old times again, which was lovely.
Yeah. I mean, it's been an up and down year. I mean, most years are up and down. I think there's been more obvious downs this year, just because, I mean, particularly in publishing, we had the loss of Sandstone Press, which is it's never nice to see a publisher stop working like that. And the same with BHP as well. BHP Comics, they've stopped. I know some publishers are really they're carrying on, but they're not going to be doing new stuff for a good wee while, because the climate is still really, really challenging.
Yeah.
And the thing with Sandstone is, you know, it just shows you how difficult it is, particularly for independents at the moment, independent publishers at the moment. You know, if they just had such a string of bad luck where like just a number of books didn't perform the way that they should have, and it was no fault of their own as well, you know, like like a lot of their key titles, I know this from speaking to them, a lot of their key titles came out and all their publicity was lined up and all that kind of thing, and they came out with when world events just went a little bit mental, so their publicity just got completely carpeted because it wasn't the Ukraine war started in one of their key titles, the Queen died in one with another one of their Queen titles, so it just meant that, you know, the promotion of the titles and the visibility of their titles were really affected. And if you have a string of them, which sadly that's what happened, then it's really, really hard to recover from.
And in terms of publishing, is that initial, when the book comes out and the initial push, is that vital? Is that really vital?
It's vital, like, because I mean, the work that you do for a new book, it gets done in advance, like marketing and publicity and all that kind of thing. You have to organize it so you have all your ducks in a row so that you know when the book comes out, that's when you're going to get, you know, you're going to get reviews here, you're going to get feature coverage there, you're going to have your author on the radio at this point, and it'll coincide with the time where maybe your books are on the table and at the front or the front of store in a bookshop. And so it's just, you know, when you add in together all those things that increase visibility, then that's what make people aware of the book. And, you know, it's like, oh, that's that book that I saw in the paper, oh, and that's that author that I heard on the, and oh, that's it, I saw that on Waterstones. And it usually takes a number of these things for them people to be like, actually, do you know what, I'm going to buy that. So yeah, so, you know, when a little thing like hits the chain of, then it can have an effect. Similar, like Waterstones had real big issues with their warehouse for a long time, and that was more in 2022. But as I say, that knock-on effect is really hard to recover from when all the puzzles, all the bits that you put in place are affected. I mean, thankfully, you know, it's not as bad with Waterstones as it was anymore, but as it was then, you know. And I felt so sorry for Waterstones as well, because they were pulling their hair out trying to get it all fixed and things like that. But yeah, so, but it's still really hard for independents to get that attention to sort of compete against the bigger names. There's been a bit of a contraction with attention to independents by the trade in particular, unless it really takes off. And it's weird because, you know, as you'll see, like the independents are the ones that are publishing the prize winners or finding all the new names and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it's but in saying that though, I really don't want to like paint like this bleak picture of what's happening in Scotland, because I actually think 2023 was really, really good. We can be a bit good at self-flagellation and sort of just ongoing criticism about, you know, lack of ambition, or, you know, how big Scottish books are seen and how we've got no like key authors anymore, and but actually there's so much goodness that is going on as well, you know, like the Granta shortlist, you know, the writers to watch, 30 under 30 or whatever it is, you know, there was four authors based in Scotland on that. That's, you know, that's really good. You know, in the Booker long list, everybody was banging on about how Ireland was overrepresented, and they were like, oh, there's 4 Irish writers in the long list. Well, actually, there was 4 Scottish represented books in the long list as too. There was 2 published in Scotland. There was Martin McInnes and there was Sarah Bernstein, who is based in Scotland. No, but there were no articles about how well Scotland is doing in writing, and how we're supporting new voices coming through. You know, like sometimes we do not cheer enough about what our successes and the fact that actually, you know, we're picking writers to get really excited about.
Yeah.
It got on my nerves. I almost wanted to like write a blog or something. I was like,
well, that's why we're here, Vikki, to celebrate all of those things. And there'll be no self-flagellation here, I can assure you.
Good. Honestly.
Yeah. And actually, I'm looking at the books we're going to talk. Well, certainly the books on my side I'm going to talk about, and it's a real mix of kind of independence and bigger. In fact, mostly independence. So yeah, good thing.
I know, money independence.
Exactly. There's something for a t-shirt. So let's start with your first book you want to talk about.
Okay, so I'll start with the books about the reimaginings and the retelling. Yep, sure. So, you know, there was a fair few. So, but I'm going to start with a Macbeth one, which it was called Lady Macbethed. Right. And this was written by Isabel Schuller. And it's a fictional novel, and it's about her life before she married Macbeth.
Right.
So it ends when she marries Macbeth. So it's before what happens in the Shakespeare. But it uses the Shakespeare play as well as the historical document of the actual, you know, Lady Macbeth to form its plot. And, you know, I mean, you know that the past was horrendous and cruel and brutal, but the way she was passed around, like all the different sort of families that were in the royal sort of clans, because it's kind of coming to that bit where clans are still, you know, really huge in the sort of leadership around Scotland, but there's also, you know, they want to sort of unite around a single crown for a single monarch of Scotland. And she comes from a sort of quite pagan family, and so there's a bit of religion in there as well, because she's seen as sort of other, because she's sort of considered fairly witchy.
Yeah.
At least coming from that background from her granny and all that kind of stuff. And just she's a really strong character, so you see like where her ambition comes from, you see where her stoicism and her just sort of like clear-eyed, like she knows she's going to be queen at some point, even when the life that she's leading, where she's put in prison and all this kind of stuff is happening to her, she still holds on that she's going to be the Queen of Scotland. And it's just it was like a total page turner.
Right.
So it was like, it's a brilliant way to learn about Scottish history, actually. Like, I mean, even though, you know, I doubt there's like complete historical accuracy here, but yeah, it was really great. So it's coming out in paperback next year as well, which is really interesting too, because the Darklands tales that Polygon have been doing, Val McDermid's going to be doing the new one next year, and that's all about Lady Macbeth too. So you know, Macbeth is a play that keeps on giving.
Yes, the Scottish play. It's interesting that you mention the witchiness of Lady Macbeth, because that was still with us this year. One of the first books I read this year was Kirsty Logan's Now She Is Witch.
Yeah.
Which is a quite astonishingly written book. You know, there's sections where there's no punctuation, and the way it's written is as kind of weird and wonderful as the story being told itself. You know, it really kind of discombobulates you as you go through it. I'm a big fan of Kirsty Logan's, and she's often dealt in the supernatural and otherly. You know, I remember her collections of first short stories, which I read years ago, were always interesting and very different to what else is going on. Maybe the first person, now you get quite a lot of that type of stuff, but Kirsty maybe was one of the first people to do that.
Yeah, it was like the Gothic kind of took a wee step back, but now it's really, really to the fore again.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, this was another take. And again, going into this idea of retellings of Scottish history and taking us back, there's been lots of that through the witch trials as well.
Yeah, that's the thing with these retellings, and even the Greek ones that have been happening, like in the wider publishing scene. It is really about reclaiming the stories of the female experience in these darker times where they had such restrictions put on them in ways that you just want to sort of say, look what this was like, you know, look at like the continued fight throughout the centuries for the women's law. So that's I think that's really why that's particularly a reason why maybe witches in particular have been visited a lot over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and well, another one I just wanted to mention was The Last Witch of Scotland, which does that
Oh yeah,
by Philip Paris. And it's it's really interesting. It's a bit of a thriller as well, because, you know, these people are chasing this woman, and there's some terrifying scenes in it, particularly at the beginning with people being burned and
the violence in these books is quite something. Yeah,
no, absolutely. But it's not just purely for entertainment. There's other things going on as well. There is education going on as well. And actually, in part 2, when we talk about non-fiction, Alison Shaw's book, Ashes and Stones, where she goes and kind of looks at the sites where a lot of these atrocities happens. It's a real eye-opener. And we obviously had things last year which we spoke about in terms of the witch trials, but it's still enduring, which is great, because they shouldn't just be a passing fad. It should be a history that's told and told again, and kept alive, if you like.
Yeah. And one of the other retellings, because Frankenstein is being heavily retold through a female perspective. I mean, even though, you know, it was written by a woman, but so this book here is Our Hideous Progeny, which is a great title. I love that title. I was like, ooh, that sounds good. And this is a story by C.E. McGill, and it's set in the future from Frankenstein, but still in the past. So the main character is Mary, who was the great niece or the great granddaughter, great niece, sorry, of Dr. Frankenstein, as if that person actually really existed.
Right.
And she is so it's around about the Victorian era, I think, yeah. And she has married this scientist, though, you know, she's actually she's a bit more cleverer, and she's got actually the more talent than the husband that she's married. And they decide together that not only are they going to reenact the scientific work that her great uncle did, but they're going to do it with dinosaurs.
Right.
So not only is there like sort of Frankenstein's monster, but the Frankenstein's monster is a dinosaur, which sounds totally fantastical, and it is, but it's really well done. So they end up having to go on the run, because, you know, there's so much politics in the scientific community at this time as well. And it's just it's a brilliant historical thriller with dinosaurs. And the main character, Mary, is her narrative voice is so good, because like she's got this inner rage, because she cannot live in the way that she would fully like to, because of, you know, that's not what women's status is at that time. And just really, really great. This will be coming out in paperback next year. So a lot of these ones that are in hardback this year will be coming out in paperback next year, which means they'll probably get a broader readership next year.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Our Hideous Progeny, did you say?
Our Hideous Progeny.
That sounds like a goth band from the late 80s. I think I saw them support Bauhaus back in the day. Now, you mentioned Polygon's Darkland Tales.
Yes.
There was 2 that came out this year. There was Alan Warner's Nothing Left to Fear from Hell, and then there was, which is about the Battle of Culloden, and then Columba's Bones, which, there you go. I'll just get them there. Fantastic 2 books.
Yeah, they were really great partnership, those 2 publications, I thought.
And what a series it's proven to be.
Yeah.
We've had Denise Miner's Rizzio, and we've had Hex by Jenny Fagan, and now we've got these 2. And this, again, is a very Alan Warner retelling of history with the Battle of Culloden and Charles Edward Stuart. There's a tongue-in-cheek and a real playfulness to it, as there is with Columba's Bones. I've only just finished this recently.
Yeah. I don't like like around like all my sort of bookie pals were like, which Darklands is your favourite? It's like, what's your favourite one by now? I think Columbus Bones might be my favourite one.
That's interesting. I would say, oh gosh, that's a very
I
tough one.
know. When you start getting into it, you're like, oh, but Hex was so good. Oh, but Ritz.
Yeah. What I would say about Columbus Bones is, again, historic. Again, well, they all are, aren't they? But they're all playing with it, and just these brilliant characters. And I've actually been, during the year, been watching quite a lot of Viking stuff on, you know, that kind of, yeah. I didn't really know much about it, you know.
Fair enough.
Going back to Nogbad the Bad and my childhood and watching things like that. So I kind of started to know about these, and I've read books about Iona in the past, but this is really interesting. And to have basically the three characters who are stuck on I, as it's known,
Yeah.
and the way that they function together. And then you've got all these madly named, you know, it could be from a Quentin Tarantino Viking movie, the names of all these Vikings that come on. You know, a Hagrid clean shirt or whatever his name is, and things like that. I only know David Gregg from his brilliant theatre work.
Yeah, I think this is his first novel. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about impressive debuts later, but that was definitely one for me.
Definitely, yeah.
Obviously, the man can write, there was no doubt about that. But yeah, I loved Columbus Bones, but I also loved Alan Warner as well, Nothing Left to Fear from Hell. And if I can just jump on the back of that, because I would say this is almost a cousin to Darkland's Tales, and it's
yes, really like that too.
Three Fires, which, I mean, it's named as best-selling author of Rizzio, and it's got that flavor to it. Do you think that's fair?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because Rizzio, because it's written in a very similar style to Rizzio, like both Rizzio and it's I mean, all of Darklands are told through a modern sensibility. But and that I think that part of it really comes through in Denise Mina's ones, because it actually sounds like if Denise Mina was to give a lecture about about a moment in history, you can totally hear her saying these things, because
she puts herself into it. Is that not the case? I'm sure there are bits where she's talking about modern day San Francisco, I want to say, and you know, I haven't read it, you know, it's a few months ago now since I've read it, but there's not just hints at the modern world, there's actually direct reference to it as well. And I did not know this Savonarola guy. I got
neither did I, no.
For one of the podcasts, and it was fascinating to hear how she'd researched it. And I've read a couple of her books this year. The Second Murderer I'll talk about when we got into crime. But it made me think, I don't think there's any writer who you feel they just love writing as much as comes out with Denise Mina's books.
Yeah. Because it was kind of like, listen here, I've got this story to tell you about these Raj guys for the past.
Yeah, it's almost like, sit down, pull your feet up, I've got something to tell you. And it's a really engaging way of reading.
Yeah. I kind of hope she does like them regularly. She just picks another moment in the past somewhere, and because I just really enjoy reading how she writes these. And I think going back to the Alan Warner and David Gregg, I think they were really complementary, and I think it was. I'm not sure if it was planned this way, but the fact that they were both released in the same year, and both of them have got they both take on really highfalutin worldviews at the time, you know, like the sort of the God-given royal patriot role of the king with Bonnie Prince Charlie and how Christians worshipped in the early days, but they're totally shot through with such brilliant earthiness as well. They really like strike such a brilliant balance of tone in being like really sort of high-minded, and then, you know, just talking about, you know, like farting and sex
alive because
violent.
Which is a brilliant idea.
I know that bit where like he's scrabbling to get, like, when he's got his shield over him, I was just like, oh my god, that is awful.
I know. Maybe the Dutch film The Vanishing, where the guy wakes up to find he's been buried alive. It's still one of the most terrible
man.
But that's brilliant. What else would you like to talk about?
I just want to give a little shout out to Burnham Wood by Eleanor Catton as well, which was another Macbeth sort of reimagining, retelling, but in a completely different context. It uses the sort of themes of Macbeth about ambition and overvaulting ambition and the price that you pay when it all goes horribly, horribly wrong. So I want to give a shout out for that one. I also want to give a shout out for Letters from Elsinore by Chris Rush, right, which is a reimagining of the Hamlet story as well. Sparse Isle Books, an independent publisher based in Glasgow. Yeah, so those are my reimaginings, retellings. But I did read a lot of other historical ones, and this one, which won the first book award at the Saltires last night, for Thy Great Pain Have Mercy on My Little Pain, which again is a fantastic title. By Victoria McKay. This was one of the first books that I read in 2023, and it stayed with me the whole year. So I was really pleased that she won the award. And this is a retelling of the lives of Julian of Norwich and Marjorie Kemp, sort of medieval Christian women who, you know, took their faith to quite a high extreme. You know, like Julian of Norwich bricked herself up in this cell just and Marjorie Kemp would, well, she made a bit of a name for herself, just sort of like, it always reminds me of that bit in Life of Brian with all the sort of preachers like talking about hellfire and all that kind of stuff, and she was talking about her connection with Jesus. And again, it's like that sort of Darkland's Tale thing where it combines the really highfalutin religious fervor and faith and language and thought and philosophy with really sort of earthy contemplation as well, because it has like Julian of Norwich really struggling with like locking herself up and thinking, God, did I do the right thing here? And it's also Marjorie Kemp is just, she absolutely fancies Jesus. Like she has like total sexual fantasies about Jesus all throughout the book, and it's just, again, it's just, I mean, it's funny as well as like such an eye-opener of the kind of the way that they lived back in those days. And it's just a really, really great book. The voices that she puts in with Marjorie and Julian of Norwich it's just brilliant. So I would highly recommend this as well. It's like less than 200 pages, so it's yeah, recommend that. Well done, Victoria, for this.
Yeah, well done. That's fantastic.
So that's another.
So, you know, I kind of looking at Witch, and there was a lot of supernatural stuff going on as well. So one I wanted to talk about is George Patterson's Westerwick, which is set in the West End of Glasgow, and it's a proper horror novel, isn't it? I mean, you know, there's a bit of crime going on there as well, but George has written this book which is spooky right from the start. It's got a kind of protagonist that's a bit Hannibal Lecter-esque, that kind of thing, and you've got someone who's on so much kind of medication that he's not sure what's going on, and is it supernatural or is it psychological? So it's got a real history going right back to Stevenson and Hogg and all of these writers. You know, I think it's in that tradition.
It's just it's all those wee moments of strangeness, like when all the bits with the birds and the horse as well that throws
birds
off.
Fall out the sky, don't they?
Yeah.
And I think, having spoken to George about it, you know, a lot of that is the influences from other places, you know, from Hitchcock.
I was reminded about the Wicker. I don't know why I kept thinking about
but there is that thing, because you're promised Westerwick and you think whatever's happening on this island, then it could easily be a kind of Lord Summerisle vibe. There is that there, even the kind of his boss who's kind of linked to something going on, and there's an old book, and it's really creepy and spooky. I've read it a couple of times now, and you get so much out of it. I love it. I haven't read a lot of horror because I don't think there's been a lot of proper horror, but I think that's what this is.
Yeah.
Wait for a second novel. It's so different from George's debut that
really different, and similarly, it reminded me as well of The Murmurs by Michael Malone.
Brilliant. I've got that here. Now that's interesting because before we spoke, I was thinking, Do I put that in fiction? Do I put it in crime fiction? Because Michael's the best is crime fiction. And I kind of ended up doing that. But you're right. It's absolutely, it's pretty terrifying again. It's The Shining almost, isn't it?
Yeah, and just like it does hark back to, you know, times when the supernatural and ghosts were more present. Like they felt like they were present in our life. Like I think we've probably kind of lost that a little bit, you know, just with the decrease in religion and all that kind of thing. But these books, it really takes us back to that sort of pagan.
Back to the witches. And still the fear of persecution, even in present day, that if you're thought to have powers in inverted commas or just be a little bit odd, let's face it, then, you know, you've got to fight hard not to be persecuted.
Yeah.
I thought The Memoirs was brilliant. It was one of my most surprising reads of the year because it was...
Michael Malone, like I've always meant to read one of his books because he's done a fair few now, and I've just never ever managed it. And I was just like, I am going to make it this year, that this is the year. And I'm glad it was that one because I really enjoyed it.
I'm going to move it from my crime pile over to my fiction pile because I think you're right. I think it fits. It doesn't matter at all. But it fits in with, I think you're right now that I'm thinking about it. Although there is crime to be solved, it's done in such a way, a bit like Westerwick, that it's almost incidental. It's the eeriness, it's the otherworldliness of what's going on that really captures you.
I know, and it's again, it's about place as well, with where the denouement happens, and just the night, like in the beginning when I first heard it, I was like, God, that would be an amazing gift to have. But then I was just like, no, it would be awful to be able to know when folk are going to die. Oh, it would just be, yeah. And
it's also about messed up families as well.
Oh my God, yeah.
Not half.
Talking about messed up families, right? This is my last historical one.
Yes.
Oh, this Fane Doorstop. I read it over the summer. Oh my God, I absolutely loved this book.
Right.
It's by a Canadian author, but it's set in Scotland. It's a love letter to like Victorian sensation novels. Right. So it's very reminiscent of...
Sorry, what was the name of the writer?
Anne-Marie MacDonald.
Yep.
Yeah, Anne-Marie MacDonald. So, you know, like Lady Audley's Secret, or some of the sort of more sensational Wilkie Collins or something like that. So like a shit ton happens in it. and it's about weird ass families who like, and a time when cruelty was often just everywhere to be seen. But it's set in this strange estate called Fane, which is both in Scotland and England. It's a patch of land that at this time was neither Scottish nor English, and because of that, it had a sort of special a sort of special place in law. And there's this family, there's a dad who just loves to like sort of catalogue his butterflies and his insects and all that kind of thing, and he has a daughter called Charlotte, and all that we're told right at the beginning of the story is that her mother has died and her little brother died as well. So it's a family who's had a tragic past, and that's kind of the reason why they've sort of been held, like they've just sort of lived their quiet lives in this creepy estate in the borders. But then all these secrets come out, and really it is about like sort of being neither one thing or the other, because, well, I don't want to spoil it, because as soon as you say what actually happens in the book, then you're going to give away things. But honestly, it was so good, and I really hope it's by Tramp Press, which is an Irish independent writer, publisher, sorry. And I really hope that it does brilliantly in paperback, because I'd really love more people to read this book, because it really was brilliant. I absolutely loved it.
Well, excellent. I will look out for that. That sounds great.
I know, I mean, like, it'll take you a wee while.
I know. How about that? Another book, which I'm going to move slightly into the more, as I said, sci-fi, but set in recognizable, not sci-fi is the wrong word, slightly odd, let's put it that way, slightly odd books and slightly odd premises.
Just weird ass, man.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with Gillian Sheriff's Brodie. So to have the narrator and the central character of the book being a copy of the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, it's such an interesting and inventive premise, and it really, really works.
Totally.
Yeah, and as the copy gets passed from woman to woman, it's 6 different women over the years. So because it's a stationary object, we only ever get kind of half the story, if you like.
Yeah.
We make up or come up with your own idea about the other half of the conversation. Debut novel, I believe.
Yeah.
And what a fantastic debut it is. And I should say as well, mention that, we'll talk about independent publishers, and both Westerwick and Brodie are on Into Books.
Yes.
Are really just starting out in terms of publishing. What they've done so far has been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And what the thing that really works with Brodie as well is that it's like Brodie is characterized by Brodie. Like the style of the voice is like sort of slightly Morningside-y.
Yeah, slightly judgmental.
Yeah. And so as she gets passed through like all the different hands, she has favourites, and she disapproves of some of the actions of the characters, but she also really learns to love them as well. It's really great.
And there are sections where she's kind of forgotten about it, and I say she, I'm saying
she,
Brodie, but locked away and kind of forgotten about, and you have to. It's really cleverly a clever idea, beautifully written, I would say.
Yeah. I put this in my everyday wonder theme because it's about folks' lives. That is what the book is about. It's about families and family dynamics. That's really what it is. But told with such a specific point of view.
Well, maybe I'll just, since you're talking about everyday wonder, I've got a few books that relate to that as well. So what would your one be that would join Brodie in that kind of category?
I would go with this one. Zoe Strachan. Catch the Moments as They Fly.
I thought you might say that. That's why I did that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is a book where it's just where you might say nothing happens, but actually that's not true. Like everything happens, but it's love and death and family and history and community and the changing world of post-war Scotland, and it pays tribute to an Ayrshire that no longer exists, and it makes you sad that it doesn't really exist, because like clothes shops and these kinds of, like, you don't get that kind of thing in small towns anymore, whereas the shop that you buy your clothes and the shop that you buy your domestic like cleaning utensils,
sold everything, that kind of thing.
And the characters of Rena and Bobby, and Bobby, they're just so believable. Like, Rena, Bobby, like you just and I just really loved spending time with them, even though like there's some really disturbing bits as well, like the things again, like what women go through with enduring domestic violence, and it's kept silent because you've just got to forgive your man and get on with it and all this kind of stuff. And so that's the thing. It's like it's like a sly like feminist book, if you know what I mean.
It's kind of under your skin in that way. The hard life that Rena in particular kind of has to go through. I just love the way that it was written, that in nearly every chapter you kind of reassess what had gone before, and then it foreshadowed what might happen next. You were never fully in that direct moment. There was always, what might happen next and what had happened previously. And sometimes you would go, see that seemed to be one thing at the time. It was actually something much, much worse.
Yeah, and and it's things like just in a different universe, in a different time, in a different, somebody as bright and determined and as talented as Rena had a completely different life.
Yeah.
And it's just such a really great social commentary without it feeling like it's like a sort of pointy social commentary about the restrictions of class, the restrictions of sex, like all that kind of thing. It was really, really well done.
Similarly, I think, and again, beautifully written, is Electricity by Angus Peter
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Where, again, one of my favourite books of the year, and it's about basically, if I remember rightly, it's an older woman in Edinburgh kind of remembering her childhood in Hebrides.
Yeah, she's writing to her granddaughter.
Yeah, that's right, and it's starting to get electricity, and how that changes the islands, and as you say, little things like that come along with getting, oh, we've got a fridge, oh, we've got a toaster, oh, we might get we might have an airline. They do get an airline, it changes lives there, and just how things that we take for granted are huge life changers and community changers, and changers in terms of a woman's work at home. Suddenly those changes as well, and I just think it's so beautifully written by
yeah. I've not read it like from cover to cover. I've dipped in and out of it, but like Angus Peter Campbell just nailed that voice, that beautiful, simple but really poignant and meaningful. Everything she uttered meant something, even if it was just about like getting a fridge and all that kind of thing. Like, it's easy to sort of say, God, this is a book about nothing. But like these things matter. These things really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely not, books about nothing. And also, I thought it's not history from a long time ago, but it's in some people's living memory.
Yeah.
But there were also books that were kind of in my living memory that were there. And I'm thinking of Alan Radcliffe's The Old Haunts.
All right, I've not got round to that one yet.
It's a lovely kind of, it's about being brought up in working class Edinburgh, realizing that you're gay, but not being able to tell your parents. The parents, he's grieving over the death of his parents, and goes away with his partner up north, and he's having to come to terms not just with that, but how his childhood was, and how it dips into his life going to university, and then working in London, and then having to come back for various reasons. And it's just, as you say, it's just a lovely. I've used this quote before, and I'm sure I will again, but James Kelman said that the most dramatic thing you will find is in ordinary people's everyday lives. And that's what these books are. That's exactly what they are. The main character is Jamie, and it's again, I think it's a debut. I might be wrong about that, Alan, if you're looking.
Yeah, I think it is actually. Yeah, he's been bubbling away for a wee while, so it's like I remember seeing that it was going to come out, and I was like, oh, yeah, at last, kind of thing.
And another one I just want to touch on quite quickly, because it really was my kind of childhood time. In fact, but after that, if anything, it was Katrina Child's Fade Into You, which again is about problematic families, friendships, mental health problems, young love of music, how music can kind of almost save you, making first friendships and all of those things. It was such a great depiction of childhood moving into adulthood, one of the best that I've read in a long, long time. Katrina really captures that period, and it's got a great soundtrack to it as well. If you go through the songs mentioned, you won't go far wrong listening to them. Fade Into You from the Mazzy Star song of the same name.
Right, okay.
One of my favourite songs. Great to have another novel from Katrina Child, because I think she's a terrific writer.
Quietly gets on with it, doesn't she? She just, yeah.
And so varied as well, because you had Trackman, which was about the kind of a bit like Brodie. It was a thing which came to life and guided the person. And then you've got a zombie book. There's a zombie novel.
There's a zombie one.
Yeah, there is. I'm sure that I've not made that up. Us versus the World, is it called?
All right, okay.
And then I think so I think 4, maybe 5. But
Yeah.
always worth checking out. And always surprising when I get to read you, Katrina Child. She's published by Lewis Press, who had a very good year, I think.
Yeah, and especially with their fiction, I think. Yeah.
Electricity was Lewis as well.
Yeah. I'm going to mention Weak Teeth by Lindsay May.
Got that here.
Again, sort of, it's a really recognizable sort of quarter-century life breakdown.
Can I tell you, the big health problems I've had in my life have been in my teeth. I identified with this novel so strongly that I had to get in. And you know, when I got my proof copy sent round, Lindsay had put in a wee blag of kind of confectionery teeth, you know, like wee jelly teeth.
Oh, I love them.
Yeah, well, yeah, I identified with this book so much. It was just frightening, to be honest.
The teeth thing was getting on my nerves. I was like, just for God's sake, just let your teeth settle down. Because I actually had an issue with my tooth this year. I had a massive filling put in at the back, and it was sore for about 2 months. But I was determined that it was just something that I had to, like, you know, and I was like, for God's sake.
But as you were going to tell us, it's not all about teeth.
No, it's not all about teeth. Yeah. So she loses her job. She, her boyfriend of a very long time, they live together. They split up. He goes off with these new fancy women, and she's just kind of left thinking, I've put all my life into this life, and it was just collapsed. What do I do now? So she just kind of has a sort of mini breakdown.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to stay at home as well. Again, what a family is.
Yeah, she just like I totally recognizable in the fact that you just want to curl up in a ball and not go to work and not see anybody and not do anything and just mump and moan for a wee bit and just ignore that the world is still turning outside. But then and then it comes in, and then but then the sort of, it just starts to snowball, these little lies that she tells and all this kind of thing, and it made me cry as well. Like the very end scenes with the oh God, I've forgotten her name. What was her name again? Ellis is with her and her mum just making the tea together. I don't know. I just totally started crying when I read that.
And incredible, recognizable every day. I don't think I've read a book that points out the dangers of using social media to kind of follow what an ex is doing and anything.
Oh God, I was like, God. Stop it!
That's it. You know what? Through the whole book, you're just going, oh no, don't do that, because you knew. It's textbook about the way not to handle a breakup if you possibly can. But of course, it's irrational, isn't it? And that's the point that's kind of getting across. I loved Weak Teeth. Again, you know, what a great debut. And we talked earlier on about, you know, celebrating Scottish writing. So many great debut first novels coming out this year that, you know, there is a lot of reason to be full of cheer in that sense.
I know, because that was the thing with the Saltires that I was at last night. It was just like every single shortlist, every single book, you were like, yeah, that deserves to be on there. And yet you could also name a replacement shortlist of books that could have been on there. There's such a sheer variety of different kinds of books that are coming out in Scotland at the moment. It's quite dazzling. Like, we're knocking out the park in sci-fi and fantasy and crime and literary, like just all of it. There's just so much going on. And I just think that we need to start noticing this, for goodness sake.
I think you and I are preaching to the converted, but hopefully other people will say this. I have to say, another book similarly to Weak Teeth and others that celebrated every day but dealt with really difficult family life is Kirkland Cicconi's Sadie Call the Police.
Yeah.
Which, again, talk about a novel that would make you cry. Just someone who's having to deal with a terrible childhood and then that move into adulthood and how you bring a lot of those childhood issues with you. It was absolutely gorgeous written. I've read other Kirkland Cicconi books, but this is the best for me so far. I just loved it. Did you manage to read this?
I didn't manage to read it, but again, like Katrina Child, somebody's just quietly getting on with writing book after book after book, and they deserve to be better known, because, you know, is that the third, fourth?
I think third or fourth.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Was it Fledgling that published this?
Yeah, I think it was another publisher that published the first few.
Yeah.
I can't remember now. Maybe I can't. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely love this book. Fantastic central character of Sadie. The 1976 heat wave, which I can just about remember, being young at that time as well. And but it brings it right up to date with COVID is involved in it too. So, you know, it's a real, it's interesting how now well, it's interesting to me and quite sad to me, but the 70s and 80s are history.
I know, it's so bad.
So that's what you're dealing with a lot of these books. You know, I'm now 20 years ago, they would be contemporary. Now, I hate to say it, they're a lot.
I know. It's so depressing. You were like, that was 30 years ago. What? No.
You mentioned when we started talking about books that looked at history and in a slightly different way, and there's two I'd like to bring up. One is River Spirit by Leila Abel.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
Absolutely got, I mean, what a writer Leila is. But this is set in 1890s Sudan, and Leila, although she lives in Aberdeen, I think now, is originally from Sudan, so she's got that. And there are links between the two countries in this. There's a character who's a painter. What an interesting character he is. Oh.
You're on my nerves.
Well, absolutely. But, you know, again, the way that women are treated in here, it's not just off its time and place, but also, and I'm right in thinking that the painting that goes back home, the daughter just gets rid of because she's so upset that her father would have painted someone in a state of disrobe. As it is. And I just absolutely loved it. And Akuani, who's the female character, what a brilliant character.
I know.
My favorite character of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, what a spirit, and you say in a different situation, what a life she would have had.
I know, I think, that's the thing. Like, these amazing women throughout, and all these books that we've talked about, and just in a different time, you know. But I mean, we're still get all this shite nowadays, but it's clearly not as bad. But yeah, like, again, there's a sly anger in this book. Like, it's written in such a poetic, lyrical way, but it's quite matter of fact as well. Like, you can't detect like narrative judgment on in any shape or form on any of the characters, but there is. But it just feels much slyer and cleverer than that. It's not like totally finger pointy. It's just, it lays out how the people are, how they are, and invites you to make your own judgment.
And you almost get the sense that the women in the book are getting on with things while the men are playing sodgers. You know, and you get the Maddie character, apparently was a good character. And
no, see, and the way that like power corrupts an idea, you know, like, you know, in the beginning, you know, there was nothing actually wrong with thinking that the thing should be different, but the way it gets co-opted into ambition and power, and not to be
starting to believe that you are a deity, that you are a special one.
Oh yeah, I really, really love this one.
Absolutely. And just finally in this section, I wanted to talk about Eleanor Tom's Connective Tissue.
Yes.
Which is almost memoir. It's her grandmother's memoir, and how her grandmother kind of dealt, you know, was brought up just before the war and then eventually got to Scotland. And it's the kind of way that she got here and what she had to deal with getting here. Eleanor had really researched her real family background, but to make it fiction, which I think is a really interesting decision, and I think it allows for something different to happen than straight up memoir. That's what I think anyway.
Yeah, it's funny that in a way you create a little bit of distance by doing that. It doesn't feel as if it's a story that belongs to you in the same way if you do it through fiction rather than memoir. Yeah, excellent.
Time is cracking on as it always does with us. It's ridiculous.
I think,
You tell me when you go, what were you going to say?
Oh, there's a couple of other.
Yeah, no, go for it. I've still got a pile of about 8 here before we got into crime, so let's go.
I know, right, but so I'm going to just quickly then talk about. I just keep seeing ones and think, oh yeah, I've not talked about that yet. So staying with historical fiction,
Right.
Hazardous Spirits by Anbara Salam as well, which I read recently, and it's the aftermath of war. So it's set in the 1920s in Edinburgh, and it's when the sort of spiritualist movement started to really sort of ramp up, and people were, I mean, when you think about it, it's understandable. The whole world, people in Scotland and people in Europe in particular had gone through this massive generational trauma, and where, you know, like grief was everywhere. And this book is about collective grief, but it's also about family grief and individual grief as well. And so this woman's husband, Evelyn, he decides that he just declares that he can speak to the dead. Right. And she's kind of mortified at this, but decides that maybe it'll help him in some way to sort of carry on with this investigation. And she's like sort of quite an uptight Edinburgh middle class woman, and it's really well done. Again, quite subtle in its sort of social commentary, because it does feel more like a book about a domestic life, like a marriage, but it is about more than that. Really, really good. Hazardous Spirits, I would recommend that one. And then away from history, let's talk a little bit of sci-fi.
Yes.
Chimera by Alice Thompson.
I love Alice Thompson, but I've not read that one.
Well, I know she's always been an author that I've wanted to investigate, and so I decided to read her new one, and it's really weird but really great.
That's about right. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And again, it's really short as well, so you'll get through it quite quickly. And it's about this mission into space where ostensibly the mission is about saving Earth and saving life on Earth. Right. But actually there's a secret reason about the mission to this moon. And the main character is a lass called Artemis, who is a dream researcher. And she has to go on this mission because she has to make sure that the people on board don't dream, so they have to take pills to not make them dream. Right. But it is and some of the folk on board are sort of AI Borgy things. I can't remember what they're called. And it's just this really strange mixture of how you create your reality, and it's also about AI as well, which is, you know, the hot topic in the publishing world at the moment, and it's really cleverly done. It's quite dreamlike, so it has that sort of weird dream logic where it makes sense but it doesn't make sense, and it's really, really good, really, really good. And then it has all the characters like talk in sentences that are quotes from literature, which I thought was really clever because of the whole, you know, AI is just going to nick our intellectual property. Yeah, sure. So it weirdly feels like you're reading an AI, but you're not, because it is a human. It's really clever. It's really clever, but also really entertaining as well. So that was one of my favorite books of the year too. And I don't know if did you read this one this year?
I did. I've got it right here. The Space Between Us. Yeah. I did. In fact, my mum took this book to her book group. I'm thinking, I don't know if they'll get this, but they absolutely loved it.
Oh, that's so good.
Absolutely loved it, every one of them. My mum's favourite book of the year, people, if you're looking. That's an endorsement. Doug Johnson's The Space Between Us. And again, something different from Doug, because it is sci-fi.
Yeah.
But what Doug does brilliantly in all his books, no matter what it is the characters. He gets you curious about the characters. So you've got these central characters who are running away, you know,
from something,
and they've all kind of met after they've dropped unconscious on Portobello Beach. Is that right?
Is it Porty or is it Gullen?
I don't know. Anyway, it's on a beach near Edinburgh, and it's all linked and you've got these kind of, how would you describe them?
They're is it sort of octopusy, jellyfishy type things?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of these books that when you try and describe it, folk might go, "Oh no, that's not for me."
I know, it's just
and actually everyone loved it, but it was because of the characters they loved and the dynamic between the characters as well.
Even the dynamic between the characters and the sort of alien jelly thing as well, because
I'm counting the alien jelly thing as a character, definitely.
And it totally made me want to go to Ullapool just in case. And when I was on holiday earlier on in the year, there was quite a lot of jellyfish on the beach that I was on, and it just kept making me. I was like, I wonder if you're a like sentient alien.
It's a really thought-provoking book, and actually it was on the Sarah Cox book club, I think.
Oh yes, that's right.
And I was really glad to see, because they all reacted going, I didn't think I would like this, but I thought that's great. And I'm really pleased for Doug, because, you know, he deserves to get such coverage and attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And someone else who wrote, again, it's sci-fi, but in a recognisable world, was Rachel Atala, The Animals, which her second novel, and a very recognisable Glasgow and surrounding area that is often set in it, and there's a global drought. It's a pandemic. The family retires to their farm, hoping that they'll see it through, and then another family appears. I mean, it could be influenced by so many things. They have to get back to Glasgow for reasons that we then find out are really pretty despicable. I just absolutely loved it. Absolutely. I think she's such a good writer, such an inventive writer. And another one which gave you dystopia, but wow, it's recognizable. I think by not writing about the pandemic, it's the best pandemic novel written so far.
Right.
It really captures the feel of what it was like and the fears that a lot of people had as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. And that comes out in paperback next year too.
Yeah, that'll be out in paperback next year. This is already out in paperback. It's Heather Parry's This Is My Body Given for
yes.
It's a collection of short stories.
Yeah,
and I absolutely loved it. It's very much around the body, as the title suggests, and everything that goes with it, the fear, the failure, the success, all sorts of things. It's so visceral and really kind of vital writing. I'm a big fan of Heather Parry's anyway, a big fan of short stories, and this is something else. I really do recommend it. Heather Parry, This Is My Body Given for You. It's an amazing collection of stories concerning the body, almost body horror at sometimes,
like there's a lot of moments where you're just like, oh.
But it's also odd and twisted and a fantasy sometimes in some ways. Really enjoyed that.
And her novel Orpheus Builds a Girl is really, really great as well. A horrendous villain who God.
I mean, perhaps one of the worst characters. Did that come out this year, or was it the year before?
No, I think it was the year before.
That's what I thought, because I would have mentioned it. Yeah, you're right about the central character. What a piece of work.
Oh, every time he kept referring to her as my wife, I was just like, shut your face, you. Shut your goddamn face.
Take your wife's name out your mouth.
No, it's just like, like, what is wrong with you?
Talking of kind of short stories, and a favourite writer of mine, we've mentioned him before when we've done these roundups, M.J. Nichols, Violent Solutions to Popular Problems. Oh man, I just love what he does. It's so difficult to explain to you what he does. He kind of takes writing itself and writers themselves and really plays with it. It's literary reference, there's film reference, there's reference to other writers, there's reference to publishers. He almost seems to be saying, bring it on. He's almost saying, like, I'm going to write about all these things, and if you don't like it, then,
Does he name them? I mean, is that...
Oh, absolutely, he names them. Yeah. And in fact, there's a despicable character called Alistair in here, and I'm not entirely sure that that's not,
Never.
Well, I like J. Nichols' writing so much. Nobody writes like him. Nobody writes with the kind of eye and kind of irony and wit and self-deprecation as well. There's always an MJ Nichols character in there too, and usually they're not doing very well. Yeah, his books are always very odd. He's done them where he takes you around about Britain or Scotland and place by place. I would say most of his books, although they've been novels, are kind of short story collections anyway.
Right.
And this is a short story collection without the theme that other ones might have had. It's great to have new stuff from MJ Nichols.
Yeah.
Right.
Have we done crime yet? We haven't done crime.
And I'm thinking that's about, I think, well, before we go into crime, I would like to name 3 writers. The new one from David Cameron.
All right,
You know, which is by Taproot Press. And it's such an interesting book. Again, looking at the idea of the muse, a very kind of controversial ideal these days. And he really kind of writes, I think, in a brave fashion, really kind of literary fashion. He's perhaps better known as a poet and a prize-winning poet in Ireland. He lives and works. But this is a very interesting read. One of the first ones I read in the year. So I do recommend Femke.
And Taproot Press, that is from as well.
Yeah. Absolutely, definitely. And also we may say that James Kelman had a book out last year and with PM Press, American-based PM Press. Now, they released a book of short stories, Keep Moving and No Questions. Most of them, if you're a Kelman nut like me, you'll have read them before because they're in other places.
So it's not a new collection?
Well, I thought it would be. And if it had been, I think it would have been on my top books of the year.
Right.
But there are new stories in it, so enough. So if you're a completist of Kelman, you know, Keep Moving and No Questions, you should get. And then
was he not supposed to bring out another collection of essays? And
I think that it's either out or
it's just about.
Press. Yeah, I'd have to double check that. And then Ron Butlin returned to my all-time favourite book.
I know, and I've not read it yet.
And it's called So Many Lives, and all of them are yours. And it is a sequel and a prequel to The Sound of My Voice, which, as many of you will know, is perhaps my favourite book of all time. And I had a great chat with Ron on the podcast all about it, which you can catch up over on scotsway.com. Yeah, lovely man to spend time with, and what a writer he is.
I know, Maurice Magellan. That's his name, isn't it?
Yeah, either the son of Maurice Magellan or Magellan. Yeah, definitely.
Magellan or Magellan. Yeah, that's yeah. Like to revisit that character is
absolutely. It was
really
great.
Good news.
Let's make an executive decision because time is against us. Why don't
as always?
As always. So let's do crime fiction in part 2. But before we do that, before we say goodbye to part 1, what's been your fiction book of 2023? Do you have one that you could choose?
Yeah. But this is the thing. It's like we always go over time in fiction because there's just too many good ones.
That's right.
Anyway, but my favourite of the year, which we have talked about already, is Fane by Anne-Marie MacDonald. This is my favourite fiction book of the year.
Well, my favourite fiction book of the year is Heather Parry's This Is My Body, Given for You, because it's just such a great collection of stories, and I do recommend it to everyone.
And also it's published by a very lovely small independent publisher called Haunt Publishing, and they should get your support as well.
Oh, it is, absolutely. Yeah, great publisher. So that's all for fiction for 2023. Do join us in part 2 of the best books of 2023, when we will start with crime and see how it goes from there, basically. See you then.